the river screamed, Elara had already decided to leave. The decision hung inside her like a shard of glass. If pulled out, it would cut everything else on the way. The city of Braxton had been bleaching her bones a little more each year, the kind of place that wore a smile in brochures, while piling its ghosts behind chain-link fences and revitalization plans. She clutched an old Polaroid in the parking lot outside her mother's hospice, the corners soft with handling. 3 kids in rubber boots at the edge of Greystone Hollow, teeth flashing, mud on their knees, a silver ribbon of water curling behind them like a grin. She rubbed a thumb over the boy at the center, their brother. Cade caught mid-laugh, fingertips coated in river silt. He'd vanished 11 summers ago, after the city rerouted the homeless camps to the outskirts near services, and locked up the hollow behind welded warning signs and a PR statement about public safety. The day he disappeared, the river smelled like batteries and damp coins. She'd dreamed his voice every month since. Sometimes it was laughter. Sometimes it was the sound that woke her now, even with the engine of her car off and the hospice windows black, a scream that came like a wind through the trees, rattling the ribs of the city. They pretended not to hear it in the downtown lofts, where developers folded Legos of glass into the sky. In the food halls, with neon phrases about community. In the parks, where new playgrounds glittered with safe plastic. But out here, at the line where Braxton thinned into scrub pine, everything listened. The hollow did not forget. Elara told herself she had not either. And still, her suitcase sat zipped in her trunk. A one-way bus ticket to the coast waiting in her glove compartment. Running had its own gravity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mara. Still on for tonight. Bring the heavy flashlights. Also, I've got the map. A second later, Cole. Don't be late. The water moves faster after dark. She thumbed out a reply and pocketed the Polaroid. The 3 of them had made this promise back in April, when the city announced Phase III of the expansion, a chain of boutique wellness retreats and eco-friendly apartments along the greenbelt that included the western lip of Greystone Hollow. It meant fences. It meant notices. It meant the city would bury the last shred of their childhood beneath. Coming soon banners and a scent of fresh asphalt. They met an hour later at the gravel pull-off, where the road turned into roots. A new sign had been hammered into the ditch, printed in cheery sans serif. Restricted access. Rehabilitation work in progress. Elara ran her fingers over the bullet holes in its lower right corner. The old sign, the one they had spray painted with the names they'd lost. Cade, Mrs. Henley. The 3 men with grocery carts who used to sleep under the culvert and brought stray cats sardines had been taken down. Progress had tighter handwriting. Nice of them to make our childhood illegal, Mara said, slinging a canvas pack over her shoulder. Her braid was a wet rope down her back, speckled with drizzle. Cole clicked on a lantern and pinned a red whistle to his jacket. He'd brought a coil of climbing rope and an iron hook like a last resort prayer. Elara lifted the flashlights out of Mara's trunk. "We do the plan," she said. It steadied her to say it. "We move in a line. We mark what we find. We do not split." The scream came again, shredding the syllables. It wasn't human, too big, too old, but something about its pitch braided itself around Elara's name. Cole's jaw tensed. Sounds like the culvert, Mara swallowed. Or the cauldron. They had called it that as kids, the widening where the river bellied out at the hollow's mouth. Witch's soup, Cade had cackled once, stirring a stick through a raft of foam, flipping plastic forks and bottle caps and a drowned vole. Elara pressed her lips together to keep from saying his name out loud. The three of them started down the path. The canopy closed around them. The first thing that hit was the smell ammonia and rot, a chemical bite riding under the resin of pine. It crawled into the back of Elara's throat, pushed against her gag reflex. She breathed through her mouth, the way Cade had taught her when they were small, and dared each other to sneak under the highway overpass where the men slept, their cardboard palaces patched with duct tape and devotion. "Hold your breath and count to 30, he'd said. "If we make it, we're brave." 30 seconds had been a frontier then. Now, the frontier felt like the moment between stepping and falling. They moved in single file along the ridge, beams tunneling through saplings, watching where the ground had slumped after last month's storms. Elara pointed to a spray of muddy water fanned across an oak's trunk. Fresh, Mara knelt and dipped a gloved finger. "Gray," she said, "not silt. Grease." Cole swept the lantern in an arc. Something about the trees here always looked wrong, as if their branches had been taught to reach backward. Bottle shards glittered like fish scales among the ferns. A supermarket cart sat belly up in a tangle of scrub. Wheels spun to seized angles. "Stop," Mara whispered. Elara's beam found it, a ribbon of water that shivered without moving, a shallow film that made the leaf litter look lacquered. Elara crouched. The film wasn't clear. It had a color she associated with pennies left in teeth, a faint ash tint under the surface that turned opaque where the ground dipped. She felt the uncanny urge to pet it, the way she had some nights to touch the hospice morphine bag and see if it would purr. "Don't," Cole said, voice tight. They paced it. The film widened as it went, like breath fogging a mirror. It snaked toward the right, where a stand of young birches angled, then disappeared behind a slab of concrete half buried in sedge. The slab was stamped with a city seal and a year. Someone had spray-painted relic above it, then scratched it out with a knife. Elara tried the edge of the slab with the iron hook. It groaned as if it were a door. The scream came again, closer. It had undertones this time, lower notes like churning, like a body being rolled in a drum. They rounded the slab. The path opened to the cauldron. It was fuller than Elara had ever seen it. The river had eaten at the hillside, turning it into a tilted bowl of stone and roots. Black water sloshed in a slow rotation, carrying a bouquet of branches, a shoelaced child's sneaker, a white styrofoam chunk with a bite taken out. The scream wasn't a throat. It was the sound of pressure forcing itself through pore and pipe, the pitch that rotted marriage to silence and quiet to a dare. Mara clutched Elara's sleeve. "Look," she said. Something blinked just below the surface. Not fish too large, not mammal too motionless. Two coin-sized discs of light, sunken and orange, like warning lamps submerged in crude. They closed, opened, slid. Elara's stomach tightened. She felt Cade's name push up again like a seed, splitting. Cole dug the hook into a root. "We mark it and call it in," he said, breath fogging. "We are not those kids who tried to grab at it with a stick." Elara nodded, and then all the rules collapsed. Because on the far side of the bowl, on a ledge of upturned earth, lay something blue she knew before her eyes made sense of it. Cade's old hoodie. The one with the stitched white wolf on the chest. The one that had hung by the back door for 3 winters. Damp with river and campfire. The scream wasn't outside her anymore. It was the sound her heart made when it realized it had been flinching for 11 years, and now, at last, could sprint. "Cade," she said, and was already sliding. "Wait." Mara grabbed air. Elara's boots scrabbled, dirt rattling into the rotation below. The slope gave under her, softened from rain, slick with the river's breath. The film embraced the edges, made everything gleam. She jammed her heel into a root and reached. The hoodie was stiff with mud. It smelled like time. She clutched a sleeve and felt something else, fabric underneath. Knew her a child's jacket with reflective piping. Her throat closed around another name. On the far bank, the orange discs shifted, became 4. Cole's voice came like a rope. "L," the ground answered in kind. It slid, and the cauldron rose like a mouth. What pulled her back was not a hand, but the rope's burn. Cole had thrown the hook blindly, and it had found the thick root, snagging hard enough to yank Elara's shoulder out of its sulk. She hung for a second over the bowl, the hoodie and jacket dangling from her fist, her boots lost beneath a skin of sludge. The water's surface did not accept her like water. It pushed at her with a memory's resistance, thickened by chemical devotion. It bracketed her ankles and tugged. Orange eyes slid closer. "Kick." Mara's voice cracked through the cold. Elara did, her legs aching against the viscous pull. She felt the rope twitch as Cole leaned his weight back upslope. The root groaned. Something below gurgled in an imitation of laughter. She imagined, with terrible clarity, the flyers they had posted when Cade disappeared. The way a child's face could recruit a city's grief, and a grown man's absence could roll over like a tire into a ditch. Rage braided with the fear and twisted tight. She kicked again. Her boot tore free with a sound like a kiss made of oil. They tumbled onto the path in a heap. The scream flattened to a moan and then stopped. The only sound for a long minute was Elara's breath ratcheting, the wet slide of rope through Cole's hands, Mara swearing under her breath, as if prayer had a cousin. Elara held the two pieces of clothing as if they might dissolve. Up close, the hoodie was not an echo, but proof. The wolf stitched in white on the chest, the burn hole by the left pocket where Cade had dropped a cigarette, the fray at the cuff she had mended with 3 crooked stitches at the kitchen table while their mother slept on the couch. The child's jacket was a bright cobalt with reflective piping at the seams and a school tag inside the collar. Bree R. the R had a tiny heart drawn into its tail. Mara's eyes glossed. "Bree," she said, "the girl from the West Side picnic last fall." 7. They had joined the search then. Elara, because she could not stay away from grief, that wore tennis shoes. Cole, because he had an allergy to the silent shrug of a city. Mara, because nothing burned in her body worse than a question without a door. The police had trawled the north side with dogs and divers. The city had eventually arrested a man with a record and a face that made headlines easy. The vigils had placed their candles in a triangle near the playground, and then gone home to leave plastic cups in the grass. There had been no body. Cole stood and turned in a slow circle, lantern carving a circle around them. "We mark and go," he said, softer now, as if the rope had scraped his voice. "We go now." Elara nodded, hands shaking. She fished the grease pen from Mara's pack and wrote the coordinates on her wrist, the date, the words cauldron, clothing found. Everything in her shouted to keep going, to cut the city's fences with their own teeth, to hunt until the orange eyes had to learn new shapes. But she also knew what happened to people who made themselves bait. She ladled her hunger back into her chest. "We call," she said, "but not Braxton PD. Journal first," Mara said. Then the county sheriff, then state. The order matters. They had learned this language the way children learn shortcuts home. Hard repetition. They knew which desks pulled reports out of stacks and laid them somewhere light. They knew which inboxes deleted attachments without opening them. They knew which officers promised and returned calls, and which made promise into wallpaper. Cole knelt and photographed the ledge, the seam where the ground had given, the hoodie, the jacket, the coin eyes. For a second, his lens swallowed the discs of light and fed back only gloss. "They're moving," he murmured. The orange sank like startled embers. The film on the slope trembled, tiny concentric rings pulsing outward as if some giant throat had swallowed and sighed. Elara wiped her hands on her jeans, leaving crescents of gray. "We should tell her," she said. The her dissolved as it left her mouth and became 3 hers. Bree's mother, who had given an interview, voice cracking like thin glass, their own mother, who had not asked about Cade in months, as if language would broker a debt she could not afford. And Iris Finch, who ran the Braxton Beacon, the kind of journalist who kept names in her notebook like tinder, striking them when the city's spin tried to make water into ribbon. Mara nodded. They hiked back slower than their panic wanted. The scream did not return. The path felt narrower, as if the trees had moved in concerto while they knelt at the bowl. Elara glanced at the river each time the brush thinned. In one of the shallow cuts, she spotted a bottle bobbing against a root, its label blistered off by sun and time. A slick winked on the surface like a skin. A little farther, a grocery cart's metal ribs gleamed from a knot of brambles. Mouth chewed open like a beast. The filth of it all felt intimate. This was not abstract runoff or overflow. It was a body's failing, a city's. It was choices turned into silt. At the car, Cole turned on the heater to burn the damp out of their bones. Elara laid the clothing on a thermal blanket in the trunk, fingers gentle. She'd been here before, collecting pieces that were not a person, but insisted one had been. She thought of the day 11 Januaries back, when she had found Cade's spoon and a house key in a plastic bag behind the shelter kitchen. His name written in Sharpie on masking tape, K. Fleming. The shelter had done what it could do, label the living and the almost. The city had done what it could do, relocate, fence, publish a statement with bullet points about compassionate enforcement. They didn't notice the car parked 3 spots down until Elara closed the trunk. Its driver had been inside this whole time, perhaps sleeping, perhaps waiting. She looked up into a pair of eyes that had learned how to go quiet without being told. A woman. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail, so tight it made her forehead shine. And she wore a green uniform that was not quite police. The badge above her heart read water and waste authority. The patch on her shoulder said infrastructure liaison. She stepped out with a clipboard and a practiced smile. "Good evening," she said. "You're in a restricted zone. For your safety, I need to ask you to leave." Cole's hand drifted casually to his pocket, where the grease pen had replaced the hook. Mara's shoulders lifted a notch. Elara breathed. "We found something," she said. She saw comprehension, then calculation, flicker across the woman's face. The woman's eyes did not look surprised. They looked like a person measuring furniture for a room they knew well. She glanced toward the hollow, toward the slab marked with the city's seal. Elara watched her face fold into concern. "You shouldn't be near the water this time of year," the woman said. "Flooding, instability. We have crews scheduled." "What does the scream mean?" Mara asked. The woman blinked. "I don't know what you mean." Elara took the clipboard from her gently, as if borrowing a fragile cup. On its top sheet, a map of the greenbelt with orange X's where the pipes crossed. Handwritten notes about combined sewer overflow temporary bypass to holding pond. A date circled 3 weeks back. A box around the words flume gate wrench missing. Elara's stomach dropped. The cauldron was not just a bowl. It was a mouth connected to the city's throat. She handed the clipboard back. "We'll be in touch," she said. The woman held her eyes for a second too long. "Stay out of the hollow," she said. "Please." She sounded like someone who had once been told to stay out of somewhere and failed. Elara nodded and slid into the driver's seat with hands that had found a steadiness she trusted. When she put the car into gear, the scream came again. It rolled across the lot, through the trees, down into the old bones of the culvert, and up through the city's new glass. The woman flinched as if someone had said her name. They drove straight to Iris Finch. Iris lived above a laundromat that spit steam into the street at all hours, so her windows were always a little foggy. She kept files stacked in pizza boxes and could turn a city hearing transcript into a funeral dirge when Elara laid the hoodie and the jacket on Iris's coffee table. Iris didn't take notes at first. She lit a candle, one of those cheap saints you bought for 99 cents at the corner bodega, and set it near the clothing without fanfare. "Tell me," she said. Elara did. She told her about the scream, the eyes, the film that held like skin, the way the rope burned, the jacket tag with the heart on the R. She told her about the clipboard, and the map, and the missing wrench. Iris's pen moved without hurry, her brows sometimes pinching. "They'll say you're hysterical," Iris murmured. "They'll say you're trespassing. They'll say the jacket could have washed from anywhere, that the hoodie is coincidence, that grief makes patterns where there are none." She looked up, gaze steady as a hand on a fevered forehead. "They'll say a lot of things. They will not say the word system unless they mean it as a success. So we give them a new word," Mara said. "We give them monster." Iris smiled sadly. "The thing about monsters," she said, "is the city loves them. They are so good at catching a single face. They relieve us of the math." She tapped the map with the back of her pen. "But this," she circled the cauldron, the flume gate, the X's where pipes met water. "This is a different kind of hunger." Elara thought about Cade's last winter before he vanished, how he had tried a detox center for 21 days and came out with a folder full of brochures and a toothache. She thought of the way the city had folded the homeless into the greenbelt with words like service and partnership, how they had called the fences temporary safety structures, until the banners went up selling the view. She thought of the way she had avoided the hollow for months at a time, because some loves required an oxygen mask. She placed her fingertips on the jacket's tag and felt the indentation of the heart. "We go back," she said. Cole looked at the rope burns in his palms. "We go back smarter," he said. Mara's jaw set. Iris nodded once and pushed her files aside as if making room at a table. "You won't go alone," she said, "but before you go, you let me make some noise." She opened her laptop. The laundromat's dryers hummed below, a mechanical ocean. The scream came again, not through the window this time, but in Elara's bone. She knew now that leaving would not stop it. It would follow her to the coast, into new apartments with nicer views, into sleep under clean sheets. Some doors moved with you when you ran. Some mouths learned your route. The first calls Iris made that night were to county and state, but the voicemail options she landed in felt like hallways without windows. She filed a request for public records about the sewer bypass at Greystone Hollow. and composed a thread for the beacon, titled The City's Quiet Mouth. She asked Elara for permission to publish their first names, and declined when they offered last. "They will find you anyway," she said, "but let them have to work." She posted a picture of the map, with the flume gates circled, and blurred the jacket's tag. The laundromat buzzed. Elara's phone vibrated. The first replies were predictable: hoax, hysteria, grief porn, clout chasing. Then the mother of a boy from the east side wrote, "My son heard it too." Then 3 more. Then 10. At midnight, a reply came from a private account with a single follower. "If you want to make it stop, open the gate." Attached was a photo. A steel wheel in a concrete chamber. A rectangle of water like a black window. The wheel's spokes slick with something that gleamed like a tongue. The caption read, "Lower IT when SHE SCREMS." The account's name was a number, 7 digits that meant nothing to Elara until Mara said, "That's a utility tag." Iris's mouth flattened. "Someone inside," she said, or someone who was. Elara thought of the liaison in the parking lot and the way her face had folded. She thought of the wrench that was missing. She tasted metal in the back of her throat. "We go now," she said. The scream arrived on cue. As if agreeing, it lifted the air inside the apartment and sent the candle flame sideways. Iris closed her laptop and stood like a woman who had decided long ago that getting fired was a hazard of telling the truth and not a reason to stop. "Let's go wake the mouth," she said. They parked 2 streets down and went in on foot, keeping to the ditch where the sumac grew thick. The hollow's fence wore new signs now. "No trespassing, heavy equipment." VIOLATORS will be PROSECUTD behind the metal. Banners promised a future with renderings of people in linen pants, holding yoga mats above language about mindfulness and community. The wind lifted a corner of vinyl and showed rust behind confidence. Elara slid the bolt cutters out of the pack and felt the words settle, heavy as a promise. "We may be prosecuted. We may be swallowed. But we will not stand still." They followed the map from the anonymous account like a pilgrim's route across the drainage swale where it still holds last week's rain. Cut left at the slab stamped with the city seal. Angle down to the maintenance hatch camouflaged by knotweed. The hatch was locked with a chain, but the bolt cutters did what quiet could not. The hatch door breathed up a smell of old pennies and teeth. The chamber's concrete walls sweated. The steel wheel sat like a ship's helm high on the wall. Its spokes slick, its notch without a wrench. Below it, the black rectangle of the flume, water humming through like a voice, swallowing its vowels. Cole tested the wheel. It did not turn easily. "Counterclockwise to lower," he said, voice a whisper that the chamber threw back to them wider. Mara chalked marks on the wall for every quarter turn. "We do this slow," she said. "We don't know what pressure's behind it." Elara braced and put her weight on the spoke. The wheel resisted, then yielded with a groan that sounded like a story starting. somewhere down the tunnel, the scream thinned, rose, became a whine, a plea. Elara swallowed an apology she could not place. They lowered in 2 turns, then listened, lowered in 2 more. The hum lessened. In the muffled quiet, Elara could hear other sounds. A distant splash, a glug like a throat adjusting, a small rattling that might have been bottle caps finding a new groove. She pictured the cauldron above them, the rotation slowing, the eyes sliding against the surface in the manner of oil and lamplight. Again, Cole said. The wheel stuck, then moved, then stuck hard. Elara's shoulder flared, the spoke creaked under her weight. And then the wrench that wasn't there, a phantom absence, snapped inside her memory with the force of something she had almost known. The scream came back, full-throated, vicious, with vowels. It rattled the bolts in the hatch door. Mara's chalk fell and broke into 2 white hearts at her boot. Something's fighting it, she said, eyes wide. Water swelled against the flume's lip, as if a mouth had learned a new word and wanted to chew it. The wheel reversed a hair under Elara's hands. She felt pressure on her palms like breath. The thought came uninvited. It knows we are here. She pushed back. The wheel gave an inch, then another. Hold, Cole hissed. Listen. From upslope, a different sound arrived. Feet on gravel, careful, 2 sets, then a third that dragged slightly. The hatch room had never felt more like a throat than it did in that moment. Elara stepped away from the wheel, blood thrumming. The liaison from the lot stepped into the light. Uniform damp, ponytail unspooling at the edges. Beside her, a man in overalls with a rust-buckled utility belt and a face like a fist. Behind them, in his good shirt and a jacket bearing the crest of the city, was Councilman Silas Markey, the smiling mouth of revitalization, the man who cut ribbons with a gold pair of scissors and talked about synergy with a sincerity that could curdle milk. Step away from the gate, Markey said. His smile flicked like a switch, untethered to power. The liaison shot him a look that Elara did not trust and did not dismiss. The man in overalls rolled a shoulder into place, as if loosening a fight. You don't want to make this worse, he said. You have no idea what's behind that thing. The bypass is temporary. There's a plan. Temporary, Iris said, emerging from the shadows like a minute taker at a burial. Her camera's red light winked like the temporary fences around the encampments that stayed until the ink dried on your redevelopment deal. Like the temporary overflow that's been bleeding into the hollow for 21 months. She held up a printed email with the city letterhead circled in red. Markey's mouth trembled, but only for an instant. He was good at this. He could hold sincerity like a tray. It's complicated, Markey said. Public safety, environmental compliance, these things don't turn on a dime. We're here to protect people. The scream punctuated his claim. It rolled through the chamber and scraped against the inside of Elara's ears. The liaison winced. Protect who? Mara asked, chin lifting. The kid with with a heart in her name. The men you bust here to die quiet are brother. She pointed toward the wheel, toward the flume, toward the mouth of the city. Protect them, the man in overalls. His name, badge, red R plow, shifted his weight. You don't know what it is, he said. You think it's a ghost or a monster. It's pressure and waste and weather and old pipes and a gate that sticks and a city that got too big with too few people willing to look at what's underneath. He stared at the wheel like it had humiliated him in public. We lower the gate and the cauldron backs up. We raise it and the river takes it. There's no good angle. You want a monster. It's years. Elara thought of every monthly public comment meeting where residents stood at a microphone and tried to compress grief into 2 minutes while Marky smiled and said, "Thank you for your input." She thought of the way the city had taught itself to rename hunger until it sounded like hope. She stepped back to the wheel and put her palms on the spoke. "Open it," she said to the liaison. The liaison met her eyes, and for the first time, letters break. "I lost my brother in there," the liaison whispered. 2 winters ago, he slept under the culvert. I filed reports. They filed me under difficult. She reached into her bag and pulled out a wrench wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it like a sacrament. Marky's face hardened. "Nessa," he said softly, like a man reminding a dog of a trick. Nessa did not look at him. She fit the wrench to the notch and turned, jaw clenched. The wheel screamed like metal under confession. The flume water seethed. The scream from the hollow sharpened to a point, and then, abruptly, slid down the scale like a hand learning where notes live. Iris lifted her camera. "If the city chooses noise," she said, "we will give it sound." They cranked in quarters, then halves, then dared a full turn. The pressure pushed back, as if something had grown accustomed to the choke and did not like air. Elara felt the ground vibrate through her boots. "Hold," Cole said again. But it wasn't a command now. It was a prayer. Above them, in the bowl, the rotation slowed. Debris that had been held in a violent cradle drifted toward the edges. The eyes, if they were eyes, rose, widened, then dimmed like bulbs starved of current. Nessa braced one foot on the wheel's lower spoke and leveraged herself with a sound like Effort's mother. The wheel gave. Something in the flume unlatched. Water gushed as if a throat had been opened. The scream clipped and died. In its wake, the chamber filled with a silence so loud Elara swayed. They ran. The 4 of them pelted up the path, Iris on their heels, with the camera pressed to her sternum. Cole reached the cauldron first and skidded to the edge. The bowl was not empty. This was no miracle to be bottled and sold, but its rotation had broken. The surface wobbled and then settled into an uneven breath. Against the far lip, trapped by root and rock, lay things that had not lain still in years. A grocery cart belly up and still, a folded sleeping bag, a bicycle frame, and in between, a cluster of objects that made Elara's vision tunnel. A jacket with reflective piping, a child's pink hair barrette, a chain with a wolf pendant, cheap metal, the kind that leaves a green ring on skin. Mara made a sound Elara had never heard from her, the sound of a rib making a new shape. Cole anchored the hook and slid down the slope, the film at the edges clinging, and then tearing like old gummy tape. He worked as carefully as a surgeon. He handed up the pendant, the barrette, the jacket. Elara took them and laid them on the blanket of her shirt, spread on the ground. Each item felt like it deserved a speech. Each item felt like a kind of justice, and also an indictment. Bones, Cole said softly. Mostly small, some bigger. He swallowed. We're going to need people. The people came because Iris had texted and posted, and because silence had broken in a public way. They came because Nessa stepped to the fence and opened the temporary locks on a safety structure, like a woman who had run out of better options. They came because the city had taught them to be skeptical of grief, and sometimes skepticism gets tired. Firefighters in yellow coats, divers, a coroner, a counselor with a folding chair who sat near the sumac and held a mother as she rocked. They came because a scream had stopped and left a hole, and people had to fill holes with steps or sound. Marky arrived, too. He arrived with statements about relief and regret and process, and with a pair of boots that had never been dirty in this particular way. He stood beside Iris and tried to blind her camera with the glare of a smile. Iris did not blink. She asked him if the city would inspect every flume gate within a mile of a residence, if they would publish maintenance logs, if they would put words like combined sewer overflow into brochures, instead of burying them in PDF footers. Marky said the city would commission a study. Ish. Later. Soon. Elara did not wait for his verbs to settle. She moved along the bowl and lifted what she could lift, handed what she could hand, made a list in pen on her wrist that ran out of room, and crawled up her forearm, jacket, pendant, bone, shoe, bone, coin, bone. At dusk, a light drew her eyes up, a small battery lantern on the far side of the hollow, where the path doglegged. A man stood there, slight as a reed, hair hanging in strings, face wearing the absence of things like a garment. He held his arms around himself, as if hugging someone outside his body. Her breath broke. Cade, she said. He did not move near. He perched at the edge like a boy afraid to track mud on a rug. His eyes were the same, mischief watered down to kindness, a stubbornness that used to get him detention and now got him through nights. He wasn't a ghost, though she had rehearsed for one. He was alive in the way that men are who sleep on land that resents them, in the way that a city lists them in counts, and not in prayers. He looked from Elara to the pile of pulled things, and then to the car with the liaison badge shining in its grill. He flinched when the divers brought up a bundle of fabric. He flinched when Mara said, "We did it," and then laughed a little at the naivete of that pronoun. He lifted a hand. It hovered like a bird uncertain of a branch. Elara took one step, then another. The slope was kinder now that the rotation had loosened. "You left," Cade said. His voice had gravel in it, a sound of sleeping near ground. "You all left. They left us behind the fences. They told us to be grateful. They said there was a plan." He gestured to the bowl. "This was the plan." He shook his head, not in accusation, but in a tiredness that hurt to look at. "I didn't go into the river. It came for us. When it rains, it comes out of the mouths." He pointed to the culverts, a dozen stone throats that girdled the bowl. "You think it lives in the water. It lives in the pipe." Elara wanted to say 1,000 things at once. "I looked for you. I was a coward. I am here. I am leaving. I am staying. I am sorry. I am not God." None of them would have built the bridge he needed. So she said the only truth that steadied her. "I brought a rope." She held up the coil on her shoulder like an offering. "And I will bring another tomorrow, and the day after." Cade's mouth twitched. "You always did like knots," he said. He glanced at Nessa, who stood with her wrench like a woman at the end of a church aisle, refusing to move. He nodded at her. She nodded back. Night fell. They worked under floodlights that made the bowl look like a stage set. Insects haloed the lamps like tiny, frantic moons. The scream did not return. In its place, voices, orders, quiet sobs, the click of Iris's camera, a dog's bark. Elara laid a blanket on the sumac and found her mother's hospice bedroom in the smell of cheap, laundered fabric and lemon cleaner when the paramedics moved past. She did not allow herself the grief of mixing rooms. That would come later. The Hollow had made a new ask. Not silence, not forgetting, but a discipline of showing up with rope and pen and hands. At 2 a.m., when the crews packed up and the bowl was a mirror of stars scratched with trash, Cade walked down to the edge and touched the water with 2 fingers. "It's quieter," he said. He sounded surprised. He looked up at Elara and Mara, and Cole and Iris and Nessa, as if they had pulled a trick he had seen in a picture book. "That won't last," he added. He was always honest. "They'll choose their money again. They will conclude we are acceptable losses. They will call it compliance. They will put fences in a prettier font." He smiled then, small, a little wicked, like the boy in the Polaroid with mud on his knees. "But now we know where the wrench is." The city tried to put the story into a shoebox. It rolled out a press release with paragraph breaks like sighs and attached a timeline that described unprecedented rainfall events, temporary infrastructure, and public safety responses. It set the press conference at 10 a.m. on the lawn outside City Hall, beside planters of hardy mums and a banner for Small Business Week. Markey stood at the podium and performed sorrow. He was good at it. He spoke of families and of healing in community. And then he pivoted into a watercolor of the future greenways, affordable housing, economic momentum, and asked for patience. Iris aired a segment that morning that did not use patience as a bridge. She spliced drone footage of the cauldron with clips from the maintenance chamber, zoomed slow on the wheel, the the wrench, the calloused hands turning it. She cut in the sound of the scream at half volume and let it ride under a simple narration. For 21 months, a bypass fed the hollow, what the city did not want to hold. People disappeared. A 7-year-old went missing at a picnic. Last night, a gate was opened. She let Nessa say her brother's name into the mic. She let Cade say nothing, because he asked alone for that gift. The calls came then, the ones from attorneys with calendars who used phrases like class action and wrongful death and consent decree. Elara did not have room for the legal words yet. She knew they mattered. She knew momentum had to be made into paper before the city tried to sand it down with time. But her body still smelled like the hollow, and the barrette was still in a zip bag on her table, and the wolf pendant sat in a tea saucer beside the sink, as if toasting rockets could fail. She took a shower and scrubbed until her skin felt newer than it deserved. She drove to the hospice and sat with her mother while the daytime game show murmured and the nurse adjusted a drip. Her mother's sleep was the same as last week's, shallow, punctuated by a sigh that could be mistake for letting go. Elara laid the pendant on the rolling table and told her mother a story without all the nouns. She told her about a scream and a gate and a girl's jacket and a boy's pendant and a woman with a wrench and a man who smiled too much. She told her she had seen Cade. She said, "He is thin and alive, and he looks at me like he still loves me, and like loving me doesn't fix everything." Her mother's mouth tightened, an involuntary motion, a cramp of memory. A tear pooled in the hollow of her temple. "He was always stubborn," she whispered, like a lake remembering a branch. Elara left the pendant on the table, a cheap saint in a new shape, and drove to the hollow alone. The crews were gone. The fence gates stood open, their locks like mouths puzzled. The bowl was quiet. She stood at the edge where her boots had nearly lost her and listened to the kind of silence that is a future. She descended to the ledge with the caution of someone returning to a fire she had survived. The film on the slope had dried in places to a brittle rind that cracked under her heel. It smelled like a workshop and old eggs. The water carried less gleam, more shadow. She crouched and looked with deliberate slowness, the way Cade taught her to look for mushrooms. Scan, breathe. Let your eyes catch what your hunger would miss. There, lodged in a cleft of root like a tooth, a lighter with a wolf sticker, the silver rubbed off, the edges chewed. She laughed, a sound like a hiccup. "You never learn," she said to the air, to Cade's old habits, to the part of herself that wanted to keep everything he had touched in a jar. She tucked the lighter into her pocket as if it were currency. When she stood, a reflection near the culvert caught her eye. Not the eyes, a square, laminated badge bobbing. Combined sewer overflow temporary permit. Issued 19 months ago. Authorized by SMARKY. She didn't need the piece of plastic. She took it anyway. Nessa came out of the trees with 2 paper cups of coffee. and a face that had learned how to keep moving after a joy. "It'll be back," she said without prelude, offering a cup. "The pressure, the meetings, the kind of danger that puts on a tie." Elara nodded. "Then we will be two," she said. They stood in the wet morning and shared the kind of quiet that made more sound than some speeches. "They're going to make you a villain," Elara said after a while. "They'll say you endangered the public. They'll collect your badge if they can't find your throat." Nessa smiled without humor. "They've called me worse for asking about maintenance schedules." She sipped. "Sometimes I think the pipes are kinder than the meetings." Cade arrived like weather, without warning, fully present. He walked with two other men Elara didn't know, carrying a plastic tub that had once held restaurant lettuce and now held the world. Socks, a toothbrush, a battered paperback of poems with rain-curled corners. He set the tub on the ground near the sumac and looked at Elara as if to ask permission to stand in a memory. She nodded because that was all she had to give that did not require a signature. He did not hug her. This was their language, too. He squinted at Nessa. "You work for the city," he said. Nessa shrugged. "I work for the pipes." He laughed, a small son. They sat on the slope and told each other things they had held in jars. Cade told her about the winter. His shelter bed was replaced with a cot at the edge of a rehab facility, and the way gratitude had been demanded in exchange for food. He told her about the man who had a dog that slept under his jacket, and the way the dog had learned to recognize the sound the pipes made before they bloomed. He told her about the night the scream woke the trees and a child into the dark, about the way guilt grew a second spine inside him. He told her the names of 6 people who had vanished without headlines. Elara told him about making rent with hours that piled like dirty laundry, and about their mother's hands forgetting cups and faces, and sometimes his laugh. She told him about how the city looked from inside the new bars, where light made everything seem edible. She did not tell him she had a bus ticket to the coast for the next day. She didn't have to. He looked at her and read it the way he used to read her lies about homework. "You should go," he said. His voice held no dare, only fact. "You can take a piece of me not made of water. You can send money and call at 3 a.m. and come back when they try to close the gate." He picked up the rope coiled beside her and ran it through his fingers, feeling the fray. "You can leave and still be a door." They walked up to the parking lot together, with the rope between them like a leash for a friendly animal. Iris stood by her car, talking to a woman in a cardigan who clutched a purse as if it could keep the world aligned. Elara recognized the woman from the vigil photos, Bree's mother. Iris placed a hand on the woman's forearm and pointed toward the cauldron gently, like offering a grave instead of a puzzle. The woman nodded as if her neck had rusted. "We might find more," Iris said, "and we might not. Some of the math here will never add." The woman took a breath and let it out in a piece. "Then help me carry the part that does," she said. In the days that followed, the story tried to simplify itself, as all stories do in order to become shareable. There were villains and heroes in some tellings. In others, there were systems and negligence, and weather maps with arrows. The city filed motions, and then counters, and then statements about vision. Activists filed multi-part threads, and then event permits, and then budgets. The Hollow did not care. It demanded attention with the patience of stone. Elara learned the weight of a wrench on her shoulder, and the sound of a flume with good sleep. She learned which men in suits would pretend not to recognize her on a sidewalk. She learned how to say no comment in a way that meant come watch. On the last night before the bus, she drove to the hospice with Cade. He waited in the hall because the hospice had its rules, and because he had learned how to live next to rules without letting them mangle him. Elara sat with their mother and told her a shorter version. He is alive. He is thin. He laughs like a penny in a jar. Her mother opened her eyes and smiled sideways. He always wanted to be lighter, she said. He was a boy with stones in his pockets and ideas about flying. She turned her head slightly. You can go, she said, and Elara understood she meant both the bus and something else. At dawn, Elara walked Cade to the hollow one more time. The mouth lay quiet under a thin sheet of fog. The rope lay coiled where she had left it, stubborn as a promise. You'll call, she asked, then laughed at herself, because phones in certain lives were a luxury, and hope had to be a bolder thing than a ringtone. Cade tapped his temple. I'll send the scream, he said, grinning. If it gets loud, you'll hear it all the way to the edge of the ocean. He put a hand on her shoulder, brief and real. Go make a door somewhere else. Bring back the hinge on the bus as Braxton receded into the kind of distance that makes sin look like architecture. Elara held the wolf pendant in her fist until the ridges made a map in her palm. Her phone buzzed with irises, updates, court dates, committee hearings, a fundraiser for Nessa's legal defense when the city tried to make an example, then withdrew. When 100 people showed up with wrenches tucked into their belts like lilies, Mara sent a photo of the flume wheel with a new lock and a new schedule posted beside it with big letters and no euphemisms. Cole texted a picture of Cade laughing with a dog under his jacket, both of them looking at the camera like they'd found a joke at the edge of the world. When the bus crossed the river that fed the sea, she felt the scream uncoil in her chest and settle into something else. A hum, a line, a promise that did not depend on a single gate or a single day. Some monsters are men, some are machines disguised as policy. Some are years stacked like bricks until a river learns to talk. And some are the parts of a city that hope the fences will be enough. Elara pressed her forehead to the glass and closed her eyes. Lower it when she screams, she whispered to the road, to the hollow, to the pipe under the next town and the next. Raise it when she needs to breathe. She didn't know if that was how gates worked. She knew it was how people did. when they remembered. It's worked. She knew it was how people did when they remembered.